All right, welcome back to another episode of the Podium Pusher podcast. As always, my name is Justin, here with Brandon. Today we are going to be talking about the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix, the Gran Premio de Emilia Romagna, made in Italy 2024. MSC Cruises, the longest Grand Prix name in the history of Formula One, probably. But not only did it have a long name packed with a whole lot of words, it's a race packed with a whole lot of action. Brandon, how you feeling after this weekend?
I'm feeling good. It was an awesome race, and it was just really fun to watch. Obviously, we'll talk about it more later, but it had a lot of different things going on. So it was a lot to keep up with it all, but that makes the race really fun to watch. So.
I was watching it from like 30,000 feet. I paid for the Southwest Wi-Fi to watch this race, paid $8, and it ended up like buffering the entire time. And so I was like, fine, I'll just watch the 30-minute recap in the lowest resolution possible. And so I watched the race in like 244 to watch the 30-minute recap, but it was worth it to get to watch this race. I heard a lot of people complaining that this race was fairly boring, but I didn't think so. And obviously, the last 10 laps were the highlight of the Grand Prix, but there was still action in the midfield. There were still overtakes happening. Some people qualified out of place and had to fight back up. So I still thought it was a good race, even though all of the action at the front may have only been confined to 10 laps at the end.
Yeah, there was a lot going on. Like I said, there's overtakes happening up, all the way through the midfield, even the back of the pack, and people were on different pit and tire strategies, so that threw a lot of different elements into it. There was no safety car, which is interesting because there usually is at Imola. So yeah, that kind of threw a wrench into people's plans as well, but it was good.
It was good. I think that flows very well into your one sentence rundown because I'm looking at the same sheet you are. So Brandon, what is your one sentence rundown for the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix?
My one sentence rundown is a race that truly featured it all. And when I say featured it all, minus the safety car, I guess you could say. But yeah, there is people qualifying out of place. I'm thinking of like Sergio Perez, like Fernando Alonso. So they were having to try to fight through the pack. And then as well, there was, fighting at the front of the pack, which we don't get to see very often. We can talk about that a little bit later, but yeah, different tire strategies. Some teams trying to go very long into the race before pitting. So that made things interesting as well. But yeah, it was a really good race, and I enjoyed watching it.
Yeah, it definitely had a lot of different aspects to this race. I think the main thing clearly is the fighting at the front, because a lot of times this year we've been saying, oh, there was great action in this race, but it would be for like P11 or P9 at the best. We had a lot of fighting in the midfield, which has been great to watch, and the battles in the midfield have been, great since 2018. We've been watching good midfield battles for a while, but we truly hadn't had good battles up at the front consistently since 2021, maybe early 2022, you could say, between Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen then. But to have back-to-back races where the result at the front has been unpredictable and something unexpected is definitely a sight for sore eyes among Formula One fans, for sure.
Yeah, it definitely is, and it brings into view, like, what competitive season could look like for the rest of this season, and maybe even in 2025 and 2026 going into new regulations. So, exciting things.
It would be just like Formula One, wouldn't it? The cars start getting close at the front of the pack again, and we change regulations, and 2026 is going to roll around, and Alpine will be a second. I'm just kidding. That's not going to happen. But if we saw it in 2021 where the teams finally got close at the end of the regulations, and then it changed, and we've seen Red Bull back out at front. And I think that really is just like the pattern that Formula One follows, is you have a regulation change and one team really gets it right, and then you see over duration the teams catch up and we start seeing battles, and then the regulation changes again and follows that same pattern. But that's okay. That's not what we're talking about today. Hopefully that will not be the case with the new regulations. My one sentence rundown is that the championship may just be back on, but not with who you think. Obviously, a lot of talk has been about Lando Norris and his performances over the past 2 weeks, and obviously it should be. Getting his first win last week, coming within 7/10 this past Sunday of winning his second Grand Prix. Incredible performances from Lando Norris. But I think Charles Leclerc has been sneaky consistent. You know, he got 2 back-to-back podiums, bringing home 3rd place in Miami and in Imola, while all of this stuff has been happening with Lando Norris and Max Verstappen. And, you know, I don't want to say that I predicted that this was going to happen, but if you listen to our predictions, I did predict that was going to happen. But, you know, I think those Ferrari upgrades we saw this weekend, they worked. You know, Charles was only 7 seconds off the lead. That's not that far of a distance, especially what we're used to seeing from a Max Verstappen Grand Prix win. And so I think as we continue to go into the European season, we find a lot of tracks that have a lot of different attributes. I completely think that Ferrari is going to be in the mix for race wins in the future. And I think Charles Leclerc has, you know, he hasn't been gaining points on Max Verstappen per se, but he's been putting himself in a position that once those Ferrari upgrades allow that team to start competing for race wins, that he's going to be in a position to be in that championship fight with Max, maybe Sergio, and I'm just kidding, that's probably not going to happen, and Lando if he continues to perform well. So I think we could be on for something here. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, we did talk about it in previous episodes, but I think like this past weekend and next weekend in Monaco, it's going to be very telling for the rest of the season, because these are 2 tracks that have a lot of different attributes to them. Obviously, Monaco is, you know, it's Monaco, so it has its own kind of strategy to it, but it's a telling weekend in terms of qualifying and how adaptable teams are to different aspects of different circuits and that kind of thing. So I'm excited for Monaco, but again, that's not what we're talking about today. Talking about the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I don't even care about a championship fight next week. I just want Charles to have a good home Grand Prix for once. I'll settle for that. We can put the championship fight to the side. Just let him stand on the Monaco podium at least. Let him be okay. That's all I want. All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty of the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. We got to start with it. That battle at the front of the field. What a race for those last 10 laps. We had Max Verstappen on old hard tires, really with a car that didn't agree with him all that much all weekend long. We saw he really had to fight for that pole and then eventually had to fight for that win as well. Lando Norris chasing him down for the final few laps of the Grand Prix, really closing up that gap and wringing the neck out of that car. What did you make of that battle at the front of the field?
I mean, honestly, it just showed me, and we've seen this with drivers in the past, but I think Lando has, you know, a lot more confidence. It reminds me of Max in like 22 and 23 after he won his first championship in 2021. Like, he was just a different driver. And, you know, I mean, I know it's only one race after Lando's won his first Grand Prix, but I really felt like Lando was a lot more confident with the car and a lot more confident in his own ability to chase after Max, knowing that Max had kind of struggled on, you know, throughout the weekend and trying to get the car underneath him. So, you know, Lando was obviously in tune with his car, and the hard tires really fired up well. Towards the end of the race, you know, I've seen a lot of debate online about whether or not Lando could have caught him in 1 or 2 laps, or at all would he been able to overtake Max. My personal opinion is that I think given 2 laps, Lando would have at least tried to overtake Max. I don't know if it would have happened, but I think that would have been cool to see. But alas, it's okay. We got another Max Verstappen win, which isn't a bad thing.
I definitely think Lando Norris is in a very good place with his driving right now. I think that McLaren pace in that car is exactly what Lando needs right now. I think we've seen Lando Norris put in great performances in the past, but we've seen him slip up in moments where maybe something he was yet to achieve was within his grasp. And I think part of that was him just overdriving the car a little bit because that McLaren wasn't exactly where it needed to be. And now that McLaren has the pace to clearly compete at the front of the field, you know, we saw both McLarens have really good pace in qualifying, and then Lando Norris being able to compete for that win yesterday. I think Lando Norris doesn't have to necessarily overdrive the car every single lap. I think he can drive with confidence, drive within the car's limits and push them to the absolute edge to get the maximum out of the car, but he doesn't have to, you know, 125% drive it, and that leads to those mistakes. I think he can just continually be pushing the 101, 102, get the absolute maximum out of that car without having to go too far over the edge that we're making those mistakes that he has made in the past. And so I think Lando and McLaren together are in a really good place right now.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you can see that as well with like Oscar and how well Oscar's performing in the car too. I think Oscar obviously is in the same level as Lando, but Oscar's a very good driver. And, he had a solid weekend as well. So I think that just shows that the car really is in a great spot. Both drivers are able to perform well with it.
Yeah, it was unfortunate for Oscar to get that grid penalty. Obviously, he out-qualified Lando, which was very impressive because one of Lando Norris's strengths is qualifying. And so for Oscar to be the one who put it on the front row and then had that penalty that dropped him to P5 was unfortunate. Obviously, it's not completely the driver's fault when they impede someone. There's a lot of blame that falls on the team for not telling him. So kind of a mistake that wasn't fully Oscar's fault that demoted him down, maybe ruined his race. So who knows? Monaco, another good qualifying from Oscar. Could see him perform pretty well next week. We'll have to wait and see. Here's another team who maybe the car and drivers weren't at one this weekend. Red Bull Racing, 2 weekends in a row that we've kind of seen a bit of a struggle for them. Obviously, from the moment the weekend started in free practice, it was clear that Max Verstappen was not at one with that car. They made some setup changes. He ends up winning pole position, but you could hear it in his voice afterwards that he worked harder for that pole position than he had in a while, and he was more relieved and excited to win a pole position than it sounded like he has since 2021. I mean, he was out of breath. He was screaming. He was happy that he won that, and he clearly had to work hard for it. And then same thing for the race win. You can look at the pictures of him from the podium. That is a smile from a 22-year-old Max Verstappen, not a 26-year-old Max Verstappen. And then Sergio Perez, P11 in qualifying, getting out qualified by both the RB drivers is a tough scene for Sergio Perez, especially when your teammate does end up finishing on pole after a tough start to the weekend and then only making progress to P8. I know Imola is hard to overtake, but you would expect Sergio Perez in the car that won the Grand Prix to make up more than 3 places during the race. So, yeah, not a great weekend from Sergio Perez. A tough weekend from Red Bull overall, even though Max Verstappen did end up with a pole win, which, showed on the stat sheet. Another weekend in Formula One, but the story was clearly different if you actually watched the weekend. So where does Red Bull go from here? Could we see a challenge for the Constructors' title? What do you think?
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting weekend for Red Bull, especially Sergio. And I think, we've talked about this a lot in the past, but, Sergio will get knocked out in Q2, not have the best weekend. He's not the best at recovery drives for whatever reason, even though the car seems to be, the best one out there on the racetrack. But, I think next weekend will be important for him if he bounces back. I mean, Monaco's a place where he has done really, really well in the past. He's won that race before, and so if he can put it back together and get the car underneath him in Monaco, I think it'll be good. But if he doesn't have a good weekend next weekend, I think we could definitely see a Constructors' title battle come into play for the rest of the season, because I think next weekend is important points for Red Bull. And I mean, if Sergio is not in the top 3 or 4, and you have 2 McLarens or 2 Ferraris in the top 3 or 4, I mean, you're losing a lot of ground in the Constructors' battle. I think it's only like 56 points at the gap now, which isn't a lot. So
yeah, that seems like a lot on paper, but in reality, you can have easily a 30-point swing in a weekend where you don't feel like you did because you had Max Verstappen finish P1 or P2, but the consistency of the Ferraris and the McLaren, I think, is what would hurt Red Bull in the Constructors' fight. I think we've seen no matter what happens really over the course of the weekend, the Ferraris and the McLarens are finishing top 6. They're having good weekends, they're having solid weekends, and they're in different orders in that bunch, but they're finishing in the top 6, maybe even top 5, and then with Sergio Perez being, not as consistent to finish in the top 6, top 5 every single race weekend, that's going to continue to hurt Red Bull. And if you had the rest of the season, if Sergio Perez is the driver finishing sixth and all of those drivers are finishing in front of him, Red Bull's probably going to lose the constructors title. And, I'm not saying that Sergio Perez is the worst driver among those six and he's going to finish sixth every single time. But based on, trends over the past couple of weeks and past couple of seasons, really, I think there's reason to worry about Red Bull's grip on first place in the constructor standings.
Yeah, I agree, and it's exciting that we're only seven races into the season and we're already kind of seeing this, which after Bahrain, after the first race, this is not something that we really thought would happen, but okay, happy that we're here, and it's exciting to watch and exciting to talk about. So
we had already ridden off the championship, and now we're maybe looking at championship fights and drivers and constructors. I mean, Formula One truly is the best sport in the world. You think it's going to be another boring year, and they just turn it right around, and we might be on for another great season. I think something that is great about it is that it has the potential to be a three-team fight. Obviously we've seen 2021, we saw Lewis versus Max. 2022, we saw Max versus Charles for a little bit. In the Mercedes era, we saw battles among teammates. But to get to have three different fights, and for the idea of you could have a championship contender not finish on a podium one weekend because the other two teams are faster than them. You could see Max Verstappen struggle to get a fifth place if Ferrari and McLaren are faster. And so it's just a really awesome dynamic, and really excited to see how the rest of the season unfolds to this championship battle.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome.
All right, let's talk about two drivers who have recently renewed contracts with the team but had very, very unfortunate weekends at the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. We'll talk first about Alex Albon, who just re-signed with Williams for quite a long time and then proceeds to have a pit stop where the team don't put his tires on right. The team has clearly taken a step back from last year. Obviously, last year they put in some good performances, and it was really because that Williams was an absolute rocket ship on the right track, in the right conditions, on the right day, with the right setup. That thing would go 700 miles an hour on the straight, and Alex Albon would just keep everyone behind him in the corners. They've sacrificed some of that to make a more balanced, drivable car, which I think we've seen in certain situations this year, that the drivers aren't sawing away at the steering wheel as much. They're more competitive in some of the corners. But because of that, they've lost their utmost advantage in certain situations. So they've been a car that's kind of 13th, 14th. Alex Albon gets in Q2 and then is in no man's land in Q2. Gets knocked out, haven't really scored points. What do you think about Alex Albon's decision to renew his contract? And then is it just one bad weekend, or should he have reason to worry after Williams' performances this weekend?
I mean, I think it's great that Alex re-signed with Williams. I think he enjoys being there. And, I think he has to have some, he obviously has more insight into the situation of Williams than you or I do. But, when a team is rebuilding, which Williams is definitely in the thick of a rebuild and trying to get on the right track, they're bringing in James Vowles, and, he's probably instituting some new policies, getting some old policies and people out, bringing new people and policies in. I'm not surprised necessarily looking back on it now. I'm not surprised that Williams taken maybe a little bit of a step back. But I think it was a safe decision to re-sign with Williams. You don't really know where the driver market and what kind of seats are going to be opening up over the next couple of years. And if you've got a lot of young people like Liam Lawson, Kimi Antonelli, even Theo Porcher, people like that are coming into the sport, are those seats going to be available for Alex? So, I mean, I think it was a good decision in terms of preserving his racing career and locking down a seat for the next few years. But, hopefully Alex sees more the direction Williams is going than we can. But, I think he enjoys being there, and he obviously has had some good performances in the past, and hopefully they can get a better car underneath him the next couple of years to help him continue to grow.
Yeah, I think it was smart from Alex Albon to sign that contract. People can say, oh, why would he stay at Williams? They're clearly a team at the back. where else was he going to go? He's not going to go
Yeah.
to Red Bull. I think Mercedes was never going to sign him. There's an open seat at Haas. I don't think he wants to go there. So I think staying at Williams was clearly his best option. I could see it being a situation where that team had to take a step back in order to take steps forward in the future. Because if you truly want a car that's going to be competing at the front and competing for constant points and eventually podiums and wins, you can't just have a car that is a rocket ship in the straight and absolutely terrible in the corners. Like, you have to have a car that is well-rounded and performs well and performs consistently. You know what it's going to do when you brake and when you turn in. And so I think it's good for Williams to have that solid foundation to continue to be able to build upon. I think maybe as fans, we might have placed too high expectations on Williams this season. We saw improvement last year. We believe in James Vowles, and none of those things change. But I think it might have been too much to expect Williams to be a team that fights for points every single weekend this soon in their rebuild. So I still think Williams are in a good place and heading in a right direction. And I think Alex Albon signing the contract that he did, I think it's a very good length that when he is on the market again, I think the driver market will be in a good place for him to capitalize on. Should he want to leave Williams, he'll get to see the Williams rebuild for 2 more years, see if they're going in the right direction, if that's a team he wants to stick with. He'll be the number one driver there, clearly have a hold on that team, and he can continue to bring that team forward if he wants. Or 2027 comes around and there's going to be a lot of young drivers on the grid. Alex Albon will be an established veteran. And so should a seat be open at a top team at that time, he'll be one of those drivers that those teams look for pace and experience. And so I think it was a good decision from Alex Albon, and I think this was just a one-off weekend where they didn't put the tire on right. That shouldn't concern him about the operations of the entire organization. So I think Alex Albon will be fine.
Yeah, I agree. He's a fun driver to watch. He's just seems like an all-around really nice guy. So, yeah.
All right, let's talk about the rookie on the grid who just re-signed a contract. Fernando Alonso recently re-signed for Aston Martin, and ever since he re-signed, Aston Martin seems like they've gotten slower. Obviously, we've seen Fernando Alonso get out-qualified by Lance Stroll a couple times, and then this weekend, just a very scrappy weekend from Fernando Alonso, a crash in FP3. The team gets the car put back together. He repays them by immediately going off again in Q1. So he ends up starting from the pit lane. Didn't have a great race, had a fire on his brakes, had 11 pit stops. Not a great race from Fernando Alonso, definitely one to forget. Should he be confident in Aston Martin's future? And what do you think the rest of the season holds for him?
I want to say that it's just been a run of a couple of off weekends for Fernando, because I know that he is a very competitive driver, and he obviously has the desire to win quite a lot. But I do think that, maybe Aston Martin isn't on as aggressive of a development track as, maybe McLaren, Ferrari, maybe even Mercedes. So, we've kind of seen them fall away a little bit, and I'm not necessarily surprised by that, but we haven't, even last year, in the second half of the season, we kind of saw them fall away a little bit, not be as aggressive in development. So that trend continues. I don't know that it'll be a great season for them, but I think that shouldn't necessarily take away from Fernando's re-signing of the contract. I think it was a good decision by him, and he obviously enjoys being there. And if they can put him with a better teammate going forward, I think that'll help the team dynamic a lot, and it'll push Fernando even more, which I think is something that would be valuable to him.
Man, didn't think Lance Stroll was going to catch a stray in this segment, but there it is. Somehow managed to
collateral damage.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I saw a couple things online. I was like, is it time for Fernando Alonso to step aside for the younger driver? No, it was 2 bad weeks. Calm down, guys. We've seen over the past years. We've already seen it this year that Fernando Alonso is still performing at the top of Formula One, that he still manages to get the most out of the car. I think this weekend, it was just a bad weekend. I think as Aston Martin continues to slip back, Fernando Alonso is going to continue to try and absolutely wring the most out of that car that he can. And even the best drivers will make mistakes when that happens. And so, you're going to go off on a qualifying lap when you're absolutely pushing to the limit. And so, that's just the way that it goes. I think Aston Martin are in a really unique situation. I feel like we've seen this from them in the past. Even when they were Racing Point, we saw them, design a car that looked exactly like a Mercedes. And then the next year they had to design their own car, and they were slow and developments were weird. And then they show up in 2023 and a lot of their car looks a lot like a Red Bull, and they're quick and they get a lot of podiums. And then they have to develop it themselves, and things get weird. And then they make their own car the next year, and things are still weird. And so I don't know, just that team and developments on their own is just, they're not getting it. They're missing the mark pretty well. Last year they brought a big upgrade package and it didn't work how they thought it would, and they had to revert to the original car. And I'm sure that had impacts on the direction that they were planning on going this year, and we're probably seeing the effects of that. So Aston Martin as a team, I think, have still got some steps to take if they want to truly compete at the front. And if Lance Stroll is catching strays, I might as well say it, get rid of him too. But that's not what we're talking about here. I just think the team still has a couple of operational and technical things to get sorted out if they want to compete at the front. But Fernando's going to be fine. The team will be fine eventually. No need to press the panic button and replace him with Felipe Drugovich from the summer break. It's going to be okay. Don't worry. But yeah, just a bad weekend from Fernando Alonso, but he'll turn it around.
Yeah, hopefully he was able to gather valuable data. I know at some point he had called the race like a race of testing for them. So it's unfortunate that he had that attitude going into it. But when you got a pit lane start, I understand the thinking behind that.
I think he might even turn it around in Monaco. Obviously, last year that was the closest he came to a win, and this year's Aston Martin is a very, very different car. But when it comes to, being perfect and exactly finding the car's limits, Fernando Alonso is one of the best at that. So I would expect a turnaround weekend for him in Monaco for sure.
Yeah, I would too. Maybe even a win. We'll see.
And there's no shot that happens, but it would be crazy. Who knows? Throwing
but if it did, heard it here first.
Yeah, if the Fernando Alonso win does happen, go ahead and listen back here. All right, who was your podium pusher of the weekend this time out in Imola?
My podium pusher of the weekend. This might be a bit of an unpopular decision, but I'm going to go with Carlos Sainz. I think Carlos has been, he's been, we talked about Charles being consistent this season. I think Carlos has been pretty consistent as well. He's won a race, which is incredible. And, finishing P5 in this race, I think that was a solid race. He was a little bit in kind of no man's land for a little while. But, he is delivering the points that Ferrari needs to stay in the fight in the constructors. And, I think Charles has kind of made a little bit of a gap the past few weeks between him and Carlos. But I think Carlos is performing pretty consistently, and I wanted to shout him out because I think he's doing a good job. So may not be. I know he did struggle with the balance of the car and stuff this weekend, but I think it was a solid drive for him to finish P5 with the pace of the McLarens and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think it was a good weekend from him. I think the McLaren was clearly faster than the Ferrari, and so for Charles to finish behind Lando and him to finish behind Oscar, like, that's not a huge indictment on the pace of Carlos Sainz. I think it was the weekend that he needed. He had a frustrating weekend in Miami, being stuck behind Daniel Ricciardo and then having the contact with Oscar and the penalty during the main race in Miami. And so I think just a good, solid weekend from Carlos Sainz, I think, is what he needed to set him up for this European stretch. We've seen him have success in Monaco in the past. So, yeah, I think, you could argue and probably be correct that Charles maybe had the better weekend from the Ferrari drivers, but I think it was the weekend that Carlos Sainz needed for sure. And so, yeah, solid weekend from Carlos Sainz. My podium pusher of the weekend, it's got to be Max Verstappen. I've changed it from Max Verstappen in this segment in the past to get to talk about someone else, but it truly has to be Max Verstappen this weekend. From where he started the weekend, finishing so low down in free practices and that car not agreeing with him, to getting the setup changes right, fighting for pole when pretty much everyone had counted him out, and then holding off Lando Norris at the end. I think it was a solid performance of Max Verstappen. We've seen him pushed more than we've seen him in the past, and he still managed to deliver and not make any mistakes and just drive at that level of excellence that we've expected from Max Verstappen. So he is my podium pusher of the weekend.
I think that's a great choice. Max had a fantastic weekend in terms of his ability to manage I guess damage limitation, you could call it. But yeah, it's a great weekend from Max, and like you said, he's been pushed a lot recently, and he's still delivering.
If damage limitation from Max Verstappen is pole in a win, we're never going to have a championship fight in Formula One. Dang it. But that's all right. That's all right. Solid weekend from him, as usual. Who is your back marker of the weekend this time out in Imola?
So my back marker of the weekend, we've kind of already talked about him a little bit, but I'm going to highlight Alex Albon again. It just wasn't a great weekend from him. We talked about, an issue at the pit stop, 10-second penalty, ended up retiring from the race. Not a good result for him or Williams, and also his teammate Logan Sargent didn't have a great race either. So one to forget for both of them, but hopefully they can turn it around in Monaco.
Yeah, hopefully so. Another qualifying where Logan Sargent doesn't even set a time because of track limits. Just disappointing to see. As an American, I want him to do well so bad, but he just keeps making these mistakes, and it truly is unfortunate to see. My back marker of the weekend is Alpine. I think it's just another team kind of in no man's land. It's like Alpine and Alex Albon seem to be just filling up spots from P13 to P15 every weekend and not doing anything. And it was an unfortunate weekend for them, because at one point in qualifying, Pierre Gasly looked like he had the pace, and I was like, boom, another prediction right. Let's go. Come on. I knew Pierre Gasly performs well at this track. And then next thing you know, he's qualifying at the bottom of Q2, and both drivers have no pace during the race. And I think it's just a situation of them hanging on and waiting for upgrades and just waiting for that car to get competitive again. I don't know if that's going to happen soon, maybe even this year. I don't know. It's just tough to see Alpine in that situation. I think there was a chance that points could have been on the table this weekend had they gotten the setup right, but maybe not. I don't know. Just another disappointing weekend from Alpine, and then my back markers for the weekend.
Yeah, it's somebody's got to fill those spots from P13 to P15 on the grid, and unfortunately, it just seems that Alpine's doing that for us every single weekend.
Someone has to, but it shouldn't be a works team with as much resources as they have who makes their own engine. Guys, come on, just figure it out. Whatever, it's fine. I don't care. There's only like 5 Alpine fans on the planet anyways, so it doesn't matter. All right.
And all of them are wearing Fernando Alonso gear, so.
Yeah, maybe so. They all just came over and stayed. They haven't got the news that Fernando left yet. I don't know. Anyways, that is all we've got for the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. Brandon, what are your parting podium thoughts before we leave these lovely people?
My parting podium thoughts is get ready for Monaco. It's going to be a great weekend. It's always a really fun weekend to watch. It's a great race, and it just produces a lot of memories, a lot of moments, a lot of cool traditions in Formula One. So I'm ready. Hope you guys are ready. It's going to be a great weekend.
Yeah, Monaco is going to be awesome. I'm excited for it. Everyone complains about it, that there's no overtaking. It's the most important qualifying of the year. There's 23 other tracks. Monaco is unique in how much emphasis it truly places on qualifying. It's a unique race experience. It's a unique historic venue. I think Monaco is important for Formula One. I'm glad it's on the calendar. Just the experience of the weekend as a whole is incredible. So I'm excited to get to watch it.
Yeah, me too. It's going to be a fantastic race, and can't wait to talk about it as well.
That's true. We've got another episode coming for you guys this week, predicting everything that's going to happen at the Monaco Grand Prix, so be on the lookout for that. Thank you guys so much for listening to another episode of the Podium Pusher podcast. We are so excited that we get to continually do this with you guys. It truly is a great joy to be talking about Formula One with you all. If you haven't already, be sure to like and subscribe. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, all of the places. You can find the audio version, probably wherever you're listening right now, but wherever you listen to podcasts in general. And we will see you guys in the next one. See ya.
Peace.